Did you feel it? That strange shaking? That mysterious quaking? We're guessing you sure did. Yep, it's true. That really was an earthquake this afternoon. It was centered hundreds of miles away from here in Virginia, but it made for a real jolt around here. Complete coverage next on 69 News at 5.
Your life, your world, your news. This is 69 News, live at 5.
Good evening, I'm Rob Vaughn. Wendy has the night off. First at 5, a sound shaking for the East Coast. My first earthquake, how about you? A 5.8 magnitude quake. It's centered in Virginia this afternoon. It was felt hundreds of miles away, including right here in our area, prompting some evacuations, rattling a lot of nerves. Correspondent Elizabeth Corridon begins our coverage with the latest from Washington, D.C.
An earthquake rocked the mid-Atlantic region Tuesday afternoon. Centered 40 miles north of Richmond, the quake could be felt hundreds of miles away. In Washington, some 80 miles from the epicenter, all U.S. Capitol complex buildings were evacuated. Up and down the East Coast, no one was taking any chances.
We just saw a bunch of people from the offices just taking the stairs out, so we all just decided to follow. All the jurors just decided to follow and get out of the building. And then downstairs in the lobby, they were encouraging everyone to get out.
Everything just started to shake a little bit, and then it was just like a little bit, everyone was just a little bit confused.
As far south as North Carolina and as far north as New York City, people evacuated buildings, pouring into the streets. The earthquake even interrupted the Manhattan District Attorney, who was giving a news conference on the Dominique Strauss-Kahn case. The last time a quake of this magnitude hit the region was 1897, intense enough to move heavy furniture and cause slight damage to even well-built structures. I'm Elizabeth Corridon reporting.
Well, we know for sure the quake made some waves around here. Hundreds of you from all over the region have called us and have emailed us to let us know how you felt the earth move today. And that includes the folks at the Da Vinci Science Center in Allentown. Their seismograph recorded the earthquake. They tell us it's been 4 years since a quake was felt in our region.
There was a small quake that was felt here emanating out of western New Jersey. That was about 4 years ago. But as far as I understand it, it wasn't quite the impact that this one was.
No, we had a pretty good shaking here. Officials at Da Vinci say they're still figuring out how the earthquake registered around here in terms of magnitude. Whatever the magnitude, the earthquake was strong enough to cause some minor damage in parts of the Lehigh Valley. Officials say the quake is to blame for this busted window at Olympus in Upper Saucon Township, Lehigh County. So far, there have been no reports of any injuries from the quake in the valley. Well, even if your windows didn't break, the earthquake may have done a number on your nerves. WFMZ's Jaccii Farris joins us in the newsroom with reaction to all the shaking. Jackie?
Well, Rob, the earthquake sent many people into crisis mode. Communication for some was virtually non-existent because cell phone systems across the United States have been overloaded. Now, here locally, emergency crews were busy fielding calls from people who were saying the building was shaking. They thought their building was cracking or potentially that their gas lines had ruptured.
And all of a sudden felt like something was shaking.
And all of a sudden the floor kept moving. We all started getting up and everybody was looking around, starting to panic.
It was really a little scary. The building shook, the chimes I had hanging were shaking.
The paramedics upstairs felt like they felt the tremor. I personally did not feel anything.
Just before 2 this afternoon, the ground shook up and down the East Coast. The quake scared a lot of people, sending them out into the streets.
As soon as it came in, we started hearing radio calls that some of the buildings were shaking.
Many workers evacuated Allentown City Hall. Central Fire was dispatched after someone reported smelling gas.
Because we are used to the fire drill and fire alarm sounding, we didn't hear anything. We just felt the building shake and we're not sure actually what was going on.
Over in Bethlehem, the story was much the same.
So immediately everybody started coming out of the offices and saying, you know, did everybody else feel that? And immediately we evacuated the building.
Some say they had no idea exactly what was going on, but others say they knew what they were feeling.
I thought I escaped when I left California. I was so scared. I really was very frightened. Very frightened, especially being in a building with 3 stories.
Thankfully, there have been no reports of injuries locally as the result of the earthquake. UGI says that it has had a lot of odor calls, and its crews are on the streets monitoring the situation, but there have been no confirmed gas leaks at this time. Now, if you think that you smell gas, you need to take this number down. Grab a pen. The number is 800-276-2722. That number, 800-276-2722. In the newsroom, Jaccii Farris, 69 News.
All right. Fortunately, very few, if any, problems related to that sort of thing, at least at this point. Hundreds of viewers are heading to the WFMZ Facebook page to tell us where they were when they felt the quake and what it was like. So far, more than 500 people have left comments about the earthquake on our page. One viewer says, "I was sitting on the floor. My whole body was shaking. It actually made me feel a little lightheaded." Another viewer says, "The house started shaking. I thought there was an explosion or a car had hit the house." Another says, "I was in the grocery store in the Slate Belt and the shelves started swaying. I thought someone on the other side was pushing on them." If you'd like to tell us what you felt just before 2 this afternoon, log on to the WFMZ Facebook page. Officials at Lehigh Valley International Airport say the earthquake hasn't disrupted service there, at least not yet. Officials say they've been notified that flights from LaGuardia and JFK airports in New York will be diverted to LVIA, while runways at those airports are being inspected for damage. But as of right now, there are no LVIA flight delays. Buildings up and down the East Coast were evacuated after the earthquake, including the Pennsylvania State Capitol in Harrisburg. The building was evacuated for about 30 minutes this afternoon, while workers checked to see if there was any damage from the earthquake. People inside the Capitol building had the same reaction that most people had. They were in shock.
It just kind of was a wave, and I saw my door kind of shaking and the glass window in it. You could see the reflection because the door was moving.
Everyone was allowed back in the state capitol building at around 2:30 after officials determined there was no structural damage. All right, let's get a check on what happened today in terms of the meteorology department here at WFMZ. Here is Ed, and what an interesting afternoon.
Interesting, yeah, and it was amazing. I was actually on a long walk, and all of a sudden my phone started going like crazy. I didn't feel it because I was moving and walking, exactly right. But let's get to show you some graphics and what we've got going on right now. As far as the actual epicenter, it was over Mineral, Virginia at 153. Again, 5.8. It had originally been called as a 5.8. Saying that it was 3.5 miles down below the surface. Then they upgraded it, the USGS did, to a 5.9, saying it was more shallow, 1 mile, but then they upgraded it once again, 5.8 the latest from the USGS, and again, revising it to a 5.8 magnitude. Now, how does that compare? Oftentimes we talk about massive, major earthquakes. The Richter scale gives you some sense here as you talk about exponential as far as the significance of damage. But we're talking about a 5.8, but to compare it close to that, let's round it off to a 6. And to give you an idea, a Richter scale 7 earthquake would be 10 times the power of a 6 on the scale of the Richter scale. An 8 would be 100 times the power on a scale compared to a 6. And a 9 on the Richter scale would be 1,000 times the power. Of course, we're going to be talking more about the Saffir-Simpson scale because Irene is on the way, and that looks like it's going to be a pretty major hurricane. So stay tuned. Lots to talk about.
Yeah, now we turn our thoughts to the hurricane.
Exactly.
Okay. Thanks, Ed.
Yep.
And you can go to WFMZ.com to find out much more about the earthquake today. You can read both local and national stories, lots of information there. And if you caught the earthquake on video, you can upload the video to our website. It's all at WFMZ.com.
Live at 5:30.
Never experienced anything like this before.
A lot of people are saying that today. Did you feel the tremor? This afternoon, Berks County and much of the eastern U.S. was shaking. An earthquake based in Virginia was so powerful that it left quite a mark in our area. Good evening once again. I'm Rob Vaughn. Wendy's off tonight. What a strange experience for us. A taste of California here. Government buildings emptied out in our area. The Penn Street Bridge in Reading is shut down. This earthquake was something today. The U.S. Geological Survey now says a 5.8 magnitude quake struck the eastern United States at 1:51 this afternoon, centered northwest of Richmond, Virginia. The U.S. Weather Service says no tsunami is expected because of the quake. Worth pointing out because some people are asking about that. We have team coverage of the earthquake tonight. Melissa Fullerton will have reaction in just a moment. We'll start with WFMZ's Dwayne Parker. He has more on the damage the quake has caused in Berks County. Dwayne?
Good evening, Rob. The city of Reading is taking this earthquake very seriously. As you can see behind me, the Penn Street Bridge has been shut down. PennDOT has even called in a bridge crew to conduct a thorough inspection of the structure. Meanwhile, hundreds of workers in Reading spilled out into the streets looking for safety.
Like going crazy, earthquake, like that.
That was the reaction as many in Reading panicked, not knowing what was going on.
And everybody started yelling there was an earthquake, and they evacuated both buildings.
Thousands of workers from two of Reading's tallest buildings, the courthouse and the services center, spilled out onto Penn Street. Several court cases were actually underway when staff knew something was wrong.
And then the whole room started shaking. The flagpoles behind the judge even started moving.
After a while, you knew it was something, it felt like an earthquake.
County commissioners decided to evacuate the buildings for fear of aftershocks. Technicians were in the buildings checking for gas and water leaks. Meanwhile, police were on hand to control the crowds.
Everything was shaking. Tables, chairs, everything.
Then a few blocks away, police shut down the Penn Street Bridge. Now, they shut this bridge down. Is that just the protocol, or they didn't want to...
There was a complaint that there was a crack that looked like it got worse.
PennDOT officials have called in a bridge inspection team all the way from Allentown to survey the bridge using specialized cranes. Now, police say the Penn Street Bridge will remain shut down until further notice. County officials say the courthouse and the services center should be up and running tomorrow by 8 a.m. We'll have much more on this story coming up at 6. Rob.
Okay, we'll see you next hour. Dwayne, the quake left folks around Berks kind of shaken. Here's Melissa Fullerton in Exeter Township. Melissa, what did people feel there?
Before we get to them, Rob, I have to say I think I'm one of the few people that didn't feel this earthquake. My photographer Chad and I were on our way back from Hereford Township. We were in the car when we heard about it, so we immediately pulled over and found folks who were just in shock by what they just felt.
It shook me real bad.
In Boyertown, Nancy Garland and Edwin Adams both say they were shaken from an afternoon nap.
And I said, but was that an earthquake?
Even after it was clear it was still hard to believe.
You don't figure on it happening, you know?
In Lower Alsace Township, neighbors watched their homes move.
About 2-3 inches. The porch was shaking either which way. I heard something fall in the house. Still don't know what that was.
Just a few miles away in Exeter Township, the shaking led to some serious sloshing.
My heart was beating 100 miles a minute.
Diane Stetler owns Diane's Pet Center on Perkiomen Avenue. After the quake, she had some mopping and other cleaning up to do.
My shampoos were knocked off the shelf and some of the other foods were knocked down.
And in this typically noisy shop, Diane may have gotten one of the only warning signs to precede the quake.
The animals got completely quiet. The birds, not a peep, not a noise. That's another reason I knew something really bad was happening.
Fortunately, folks had little to no damage to report, but they sure had a story to tell.
I don't believe it.
I'd rather not have another one.
And we are hearing stories from folks all over. We have staffers in our newsroom whose families live in New England. They're calling saying they felt the quake up there. My family lives in Western Pennsylvania. They called me. They said they felt the quake out there. So this is something folks all over the place are talking about tonight. We are live in Exeter Township. I'm Melissa Fullerton, 69 News.
Well, the Quakertown area where I was got a little bit of a shake as well, although it didn't last very long. Just seemed like a second or two. Chief Meteorologist Ed Hanna is here with more on the massive quake. And Ed, I guess you did not feel it yourself at all.
Didn't. I was working out, and I didn't feel it. I think it had something to do with folks that were moving, whether you're in a car or working out. Obviously, it was kind of minor enough here in our area that you may just have missed it. But those folks that were sort of stationary or you quiet enough you could hear the china closet or something move around you. Take a look real quickly. Mineral, Virginia at 1:53, just 7 minutes before 2, 5.8 on the Richter scale, and that had changed. Originally, it was 5.8, saying it was 3.5 miles down below the center of the Earth. Then they upgraded it or changed it to 5.9, saying it was more shallow. 1 mile down. Then they revised it once again, and the USGS now has it at 5.8, 3.5 miles down. To give you some sense here, and this is really gives you, because oftentimes we talk about the Richter scale and those just massive earthquakes that cause such tremendous damage. You talk about a 7 on the Richter scale, and again, if we would say this one is a 5.8, 5.9, around 6, a 7 on the Richter scale, 10 times the power of a 6 on the scale. An 8 on the Richter scale would be 100 times the power of what we saw in Mineral, Virginia. Virginia, and a 9, 1,000 times the power. Very interesting, Rob, an interesting note. And, of course, we're going to be talking more about Irene because that is something that we really got to keep an eye on. This is going to be a major hurricane. So, but to give you an idea here, the approximate amount of TNT, Rob, for a seismic energy yield to produce a 5.8 on the Richter scale, you need 7.6 kilotons of TNT to produce that type of activity. Pretty interesting. Yep.
That's more than a little bit, I take it.
More than a little bit. Yep.
We had quite a shaking. We sure did. Thanks, Ed. Yep. We'd like to thank everybody who called and emailed us moments after the quake. We heard from viewers in Reading, Douglasville, Fleetwood, and Blandon. And we hear that those of you are now sounding off on our Facebook page as well. Here's what some of the viewers are saying. Melissa Ann writes, I live in Hyde Park, which is outside Reading. I felt everything shake. Scared the hell out of me and my neighbors. I called my mom, who lives 2 miles away, and she said she didn't feel it. Katie says, I felt it in Hamburg. I was the only person in my house that felt it, but only my bed shook. Joan wrote this, nothing in New Berlinville at our house, Berks County, but my daughter in Boyertown had bottles shaking and her dresser moved forward. And Sherry is either feeling lucky or left out. She writes, I felt nothing where I live in Kutztown. Stay with 69 News for much more on the earthquake today and its impact on our region. We'll have another update at 6. You can also get information anytime by going to WFMZ.com. Earthquakes unheard of. A 2.4 magnitude earthquake shook Berks in 2006. There were actually several smaller ones before that. The biggest quake in Berks was 4.6 magnitude. You may remember that. It was 1994. Dwayne mentioned the Penn Street Bridge closure. It's making the evening commute a little messier than usual in Reading. Here is Rick with traffic in the traffic center.
All right, thanks a lot, Rob. Yes, the Penn Street Bridge remains closed, so Buttonwood Street Bridge, Binghamton Street Bridge, really jammed up. 183 feeling some extra traffic volume as people use Schuylkill Avenue to get in and out of town. So this will continue as bridge inspectors continue to work and make sure everything's okay on the Penn Street Bridge. Now, speaking of bridge inspectors, they're working all around the area, as a matter of fact, because of this earthquake. So you might see a lane restriction here and there around Berks County as bridge inspectors check out, most especially the long bridges. They just want to make sure everything is good. Current accidents right now, Birdsboro, West Main Street. They have it closed there, Main Street. That's 724 through Birdsboro Borough. It's closed between Jackson Street and Route 345. And we had an earlier crash on the West Shore bypass during that closure right under the Penn Avenue Bridge. That has been reopened. Also problems in Muhlenberg Township at 61 and 12. All clear now, too. 222, normal business there, heavy through Maxatawny, Richmond, and Maiden Creek Townships. 78 has been a good ride all afternoon, and clean travel lanes here through the northern townships of Berks County. The traffic is sponsored by Cadillac Summer's Best, now going on at your Reading Cadillac dealers. Rick Edwards in the 69 News Traffic Center.
That's it.
How about that shaking today? A substantial earthquake struck, centered in Virginia today. It sent a ripple effect up and down the East Coast. I'm sure many of you felt it. A 5.8 magnitude earthquake. It hit around 1:50 this afternoon, centered about 4 miles underneath Mineral, Virginia, a small town about 90 miles southwest of Washington. Officials in Washington, D.C. say there were numerous injuries and minor damage, but nothing serious. From Boston to the Carolinas, people felt their surroundings shake. President Obama got jolted right before a round of golf on his vacation on Martha's Vineyard.
This standard has protected.
Oh my gosh, at this news conference in New York City, the quake struck in the middle of a sentence being uttered by the DA there in the sexual assault case against Dominique Strauss-Kahn. And that sent New Yorkers spilling into the streets. New York's airports were shut down briefly and inspected, but conditions quickly returned to normal at transportation centers on the eastern seaboard. Our region was not left out of the earthquake's reach. We are told the quake busted this window at Olympus, at the U.S. headquarters of the company in Upper Saucon Township, Lehigh County. People from Phillipsburg to Reading called our newsroom, hundreds of them, to tell us they had felt the quake and wondering what was going on. It's been 4 years since an earthquake was felt in the Lehigh Valley, so naturally today's quake is the talk of the town, to say the least. We begin our team coverage with WFMZ's Jaccii Farris. She joins us in the studio with local reaction to the quake. Jaccii?
Well, Rob, some people felt it and some people didn't. Cell phone service has been spotty to non-existent for some all day, but everyone felt and saw the aftermath.
I started shaking at my desk, and I got up and started shaking some more.
We all just started running out, and everyone from different floors then was coming down on the stairs.
Shaken but safe, workers stand outside Allentown City Hall after a 5.8 earthquake rocks the East Coast.
As soon as it came in, we started hearing radio calls that some of the buildings were shaking.
Emergency crews across the valley were flooded with calls. People saying things like they heard a cracking noise in their homes or smelled gas. In Bethlehem, people on Broad Street were frustrated, trying to make phone calls to loved ones, many not getting through because of a massive network overload. Everyone talking about what they felt.
And all of a sudden felt like something was shaking and we weren't really sure what was going on.
This is our seismograph showing real-time seismic activity.
At the Da Vinci Science Center, scientists felt the quake too, measuring it on a seismograph. Troy Thrash explains how an East Coast earthquake is different from those in other parts of the country.
In the East Coast, we've got primarily bedrock here. It's much more solid, so the waves can travel a lot farther.
And just to let you know, PennDOT says crews are out inspecting state bridges, and UGI says crews are doing street monitoring right now. UGI says so far no leaks have been confirmed. Rob?
All right, Jackie, thanks. As the tremors traveled through the state of Pennsylvania and New Jersey, fear could be felt in Berks County, Pennsylvania. Buildings were evacuated there, and a bridge leading into the city of Reading was shut down, and thousands of people flooded the streets of Reading. Dwayne Parker is live in Reading with the very latest on that. Dwayne?
Good evening, Rob. Right now, one of the major issues in Reading is possible structural damage. In fact, the bridge behind me, the Penn Street Bridge, has been shut down for inspection. Special cranes are expected to arrive any minute to conduct a preliminary review. Meanwhile, many in the city are just trying to catch their breath.
It was just really weird because you didn't know what it was. I thought, you know, no way it was an earthquake.
Disbelief was on the faces of hundreds of people in Reading as they realized that they had just experienced an earthquake.
The house just kept, it just kept sort of like trembling, like shaking, not really knowing what it was going to do. You know, you think all sorts of things.
Thousands of workers in Reading also didn't know what to think. County commissioners decided to evacuate two of Reading's tallest buildings, the courthouse and the services center, for fear of aftershocks.
It was felt pretty good here, so we should take all the precautions we can to make sure everybody's safe.
Even in the outer-lying municipalities like Boyertown, residents were shaken up, unaware about what had happened in Virginia.
It shook me real bad.
At Diane's Pet Center in Exeter Township, workers knew they had to act fast.
The ceiling started rolling, the water started sloshing out of the fish tanks, and I thought, I better get out of this building.
Police say if you plan on heading back into Reading, avoid the Penn Street Bridge. Officials shut down the bridge over reports of possible cracks. PennDOT rushed a bridge inspection team from Allentown to analyze the structure.
They're going to take that opportunity to inspect the whole thing just to make sure that there's nothing wrong.
Now, officials say the Penn Street Bridge will be closed until further notice. We are live in Reading. I'm Dwayne Parker, 69 News.
Thank you for the update, Dwayne. Now to Harrisburg. Officials evacuated the state capitol complex following the earthquake. Lawmakers and their staff were left stunned while workers searched the complex for damage.
We were in the office working, and it was one of those moments where everybody sort of shook a little bit and turned around and looked at each other and said, did that really just happen?
It appears the state capitol did not sustain any major damage. Officials let people back inside the building at about 2:30, 40 minutes after the ordeal began. For more coverage of today's earthquake, go to our website, WFMZ.com. You can also leave comments on the WFMZ Facebook page. More than 500 people have done so already, so you can join that conversation. We'll have continuing coverage of the quake